The first thing she registered was the sound. Not the distant, heroic chop of a single water bomber or a meaty flight, but a deep, guttural, and percussive thunder that seemed to vibrate up from the very bedrock of the earth. It was a sound that didn't belong in the quiet, ash-dusted stillness of her suburban street in Pine Ridge, California. Maya Rivera stood on her small porch, the ceramic of her coffee mug cold against her palm. She'd been trying to take a sip of the lukewarm liquid for 10 minutes, but her body had other ideas, swaying on the precipice of a sleep so profound it felt like a cliff edge. Her scrubs, once a cheerful sea blue, were now a Jackson Pollock of soot, sweat, and God only knew what else. For 96 consecutive hours, she had been a nurse. Now, she was just a column of exhaustion waiting to collapse. Then the source of the sound crested the smoke-hazed ridge. One helicopter, then two, three. They were a mix of military green, stark white, with the county sheriff's star, and a few menacing, unmarked black machines that looked like angry hornets. They didn't pass over. They descended. "Well, this is new," a voice in her head, thick with a sarcasm born of 4 sleepless days, drawled. "I was expecting maybe a fruit basket, or at least a nap. 12 helicopters seems a little extra." One after another, they settled with deafening finality. They landed in the community park across the street, its playground equipment looking like abandoned toys. They landed on the street itself, their rotors kicking up a blinding cyclone of gray ash that flattened her prized, drought-resistant rose bushes. She counted them. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. An entire squadron. For her, did I leave the stove on? Maybe they're here to congratulate me on the world's longest nursing shift. Yeah, right. The lead helicopter, a sleek Bell 412 with the county seal on its side, powered down its rotors with a final, dying groan. The side door slid open. A woman in a crisp, spotless Office of Emergency Management polo shirt stepped out, her face a mask of stern displeasure. Maya recognized her from the news briefings, Director Sheila Evans. Behind her, looking apoplectic in a wrinkled but still expensive suit, was her boss, Hospital Administrator Mark Peterson. "Oh, good," Maya's inner monologue continued, the welcome wagon from hell. A sheriff's deputy, a young man named Miller whom she vaguely recognized, detached himself from the swarm of officials now pouring onto her lawn. He walked toward her porch, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm, in a way that was probably meant to be casual, but was anything but. He couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Maya Rivera?" he asked, his voice tight. Maya just stared at him, too tired to form words. She gave a slight nod. "I need you to come with us," Deputy Miller said, gesturing vaguely toward the assembled authority figures. "There are some people who have a lot of questions for you." Questions. That's what they called it. She looked past them, past the absurd display of force currently turning her quiet street into a forward operating base. Her gaze drifted toward the mountains, where a thick column of greasy black smoke still scarred the hazy orange sky. A shiver, completely unrelated to the morning chill, traced its way down her spine. Her mind, a frayed and exhausted thing, snagged on a memory and pulled her back. 24 hours earlier, a different voice in her head narrated, this one clearer, steadier, like a documentary filmmaker setting a scene. "I had just finished the longest 4 days of my life. The world, or at least the small part of it that had noticed, was calling me a hero. But in America, being a hero can be a liability. An unbudgeted, unsanctioned, and uninsured liability. It all started with a plume of smoke, and a choice. 97 hours before 12 helicopters landed on her lawn, Pine Ridge was a postcard. Nestled in the San Bernardino Mountains, it was the kind of town people moved to for the clean air and the illusion of safety, a place of craft breweries, hiking trails, and a strong sense of community. Maya's life there was a frantic but managed juggling act. She was an ER nurse at Pine Ridge Regional, a single mom to her 14-year-old son. Leoho was mercifully on his annual summer trip with his dad in Oregon and a woman who felt like she was perpetually 3 minutes behind schedule. That Tuesday began with a familiar chaos. The ER was humming with the usual summer symphony. A tourist with a sprained ankle, a toddler who'd swallowed a Lego, a chest pain in bed, 3 that needed immediate attention. Maya moved through it all like a shark, a creature perfectly adapted to her environment. "Get me a full-panel troponins and a portable EKG stat," she'd commanded, her voice cutting through the noise as she worked on the chest pain patient. A minute later, She was deftly calming the terrified mother of the Lego swallower. "Don't worry, we'll get it. Frankly, I'd be more worried if he'd swallowed the instructions." The mother let out a watery laugh. Her colleague, Dr. Ben Carter, a perpetually exhausted but brilliant physician, gave her a tired grin. "You're a machine, Maya. A machine that runs on lukewarm coffee and the quiet desperation of others," she'd quipped back, not missing a beat. It was during a rare lull that she saw Hospital Administrator Mark Peterson making his rounds. He wasn't a doctor, he was a man with an MBA and the soul of a spreadsheet. He moved through the ER with the air of a landlord inspecting a troublesome property. He stopped by the nurse's station, his eyes scanning the staffing chart on the wall. "Let's try to keep the hours manageable this week, Rivera," he said, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of warmth. "The board is looking closely at departmental efficiency." Translation: "Let someone die in the waiting room if it saves us paying time." And a half, Maya thought, giving him a tight, professional smile. "Got it, Chief." On the wall-mounted television, a local news anchor was talking about a small brush fire a few miles away in the national forest. They called it the Creek Fire. A chyron at the bottom of the screen read, 5% contained. No one paid it much mind. In Southern California, fire in the summer was like snow in the winter, a seasonal nuisance, until it wasn't. By Wednesday morning it wasn't. The Santa Ana winds had arrived in the night, hot and ferocious, breathing demonic life into the creek fire. It had exploded, devouring tens of thousands of acres in a matter of hours. The sky over Pine Ridge was a bruised, apocalyptic ceiling of orange and gray. Ash, fine as talcum powder, coated every surface. The hospital was no longer dealing with sprained ankles. It was a war zone. Smoke inhalation, dehydration, and horrifying burns flooded through the ER doors. The power flickered, died, then came back on via the groaning backup generators. The main highway out of town was a crimson line on Google Maps, a gridlocked artery of panic. Evacuation orders, once for the distant west side, were now creeping closer, a relentless tide of automated phone calls and blaring alerts. At 2 p.m., Peterson called a mandatory staff meeting in the cafeteria. His face was grim, but his voice was clinical. He stood before the exhausted, soot-stained staff and laid out the corporate disaster plan. Per Directive 7.4 of the Corporate Emergency Protocol, we are officially evacuating Pine Ridge Regional, he announced. All ambulatory patients will be discharged immediately. Critical patients will be transported via our pre-arranged ambulance convoy to our partner facility, St. Jude's in the Valley. All staff are to evacuate immediately thereafter. I want to be clear. We are a hospital, not a public shelter. Dr. Carter shot to his feet. "Mark, that's insane. The convoy can only take a dozen criticals at most. We have twice that number who can't be moved easily. And what about the people from the Sunnyside Assisted Living Facility down the road? Their evacuation bus broke down. They're walking over here right now. There are 30 of them." Peterson's jaw tightened. "Our liability is limited to the patients currently admitted under our care. We are not responsible for the entire town. The County Office of Emergency Management is handling the broader public evacuation." He scanned the room, his gaze landing on Maya. "Rivera, your shift ended 2 hours ago. Go home. Secure your property. That is a direct order." Maya stood in the chaotic parking lot a few minutes later, her car keys feeling heavy in her hand. The air was thick and tasted of charcoal. She could hear the fire now, a distant, hungry roar like a jet engine. She got in her car, her mind numb. Her training, her employment contract, her boss, they all screamed at her to drive away. "Save yourself." Her phone rang. The screen showed a picture of her son, Leo, grinning with a mouth full of braces. She answered, her voice catching. "Mom, are you okay? The news looks bad." "I'm okay, sweetie. I'm fine," she lied, the words tasting like ash. "You just stay safe with your dad. I love you." "Love you too, Mom." The call ended. That was all it took. The love for her son, the terror in his voice, it all coalesced into a single, unshakable point of clarity. She looked at the hospital entrance. The last of the official ambulances was pulling away. Huddled near the sliding glass doors was a group of about 20 elderly people in pajamas and robes, their faces etched with a terror so pure it made Maya's stomach clench. A few harried nurses' aides were with them, looking utterly lost. On a TV inside the lobby, she could see director Sheila Evans speaking from a pristine command center 50 miles away, assuring the public that all necessary resources have been deployed. It was the most profound lie Maya had ever witnessed. She could see the truth right in front of her, abandoned on the curb. Protocol, liability, orders, she thought. They're just words people use to absolve themselves of having a soul. To hell with that. She got out of her car. She marched over to a hospital supply van, a Ford Transit used for inter-office mail. In the panicked evacuation, someone had left the keys dangling in the ignition. She saw Ben Carter standing nearby, looking at the abandoned group with a pained, helpless expression. "Ben," she called out, her voice hard as steel. "Help me load them up, and go back inside. Grab every portable oxygen tank, every IV bag, and every burn kit you can find. We're not leaving them." Ben stared at her, his eyes wide. "Maya, Peterson will have our badges for this. We'll be fired. Sued, probably? Blacklisted?" Maya yanked open the van's side door. "I'd rather be fired for saving someone than be employed for leaving them to die. You in?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a lifetime of rule-following warring with the simple, undeniable humanity of the moment. Then, he nodded. The 96 hours had begun. Their sanctuary was the Pine Ridge Community Church. It was a sturdy, old stone building set back from the main road, surrounded by a large, well-irrigated lawn that the fire marshal had, in a moment of foresight last spring, designated a potential defensible space. Maya directed the van into its parking lot as the first embers, carried on the ferocious wind, began to skitter across the asphalt like malevolent fireflies. Inside, the church hall was cool and quiet, smelling of old hymnals and lemon polish. That peace was quickly shattered. Maya, Ben, two other nurses named Sarah and Raj who had refused to leave, and a brave young paramedic named Luis quickly transformed the hall into a rogue field hospital. They pushed pews against the walls to make room for rows of donated sleeping bags and blankets. They designated a corner for triage, another for supplies. The 30 souls they brought with them were a cross-section of the vulnerable. There was Eleanor Vance, 88 years old with dementia, who kept asking for her husband who had passed away in 1998. There was the Jackson family, whose minivan had broken down, with 2 young kids and a pregnant mother. There was a volunteer firefighter named Carlos who'd been separated from his crew, his face flushed from the heat and his arm bearing a nasty second-degree burn. This was Maya's domain. The chaos of the ER had been a training ground for this exact moment. She was no longer just a nurse, she was a general. "Sarah, get vitals on everyone. Start with the oldest. Raj, I need IV drips for the Jacksons and Carlos, they're dehydrated. Luis, set up the oxygen tanks and triage them by respiratory distress. Ben, you're with me." She moved with an economy of motion that was breathtaking to watch. She knelt beside Eleanor, whose eyes were wide with fear. "Hello, Eleanor," Maya said, her voice soft. "My name is Maya. It's 2025. We're going to keep you safe here." She managed to get the woman to drink some water, her calm voice cutting through the fog of dementia. She then moved to the firefighter, Carlos. She examined his arm. "Okay, this is going to hurt," she said, her tone all business. She carefully debrided the wound, cleaning it with precious bottled water and applying a burn dressing she'd liberated from the hospital. Her internal monologue was a running commentary of dark humor and pure pragmatism. "Okay, triage categories are as follows. 1. Actively on fire. 2. Not on fire but really not happy about it. 3. Freaking out but physically fine. My medical license is probably already being used as a coaster on Peterson's desk, so what's a little unlicensed field medicine between friends? At least the lighting in here is dramatic." Around the 30th hour, as the fire roared over the ridge behind them, painting the stained glass windows in flickering, hellish shades of red and orange, a Pine Ridge County Sheriff's SUV, its lights flashing, screeched to a halt outside. Deputy Miller got out, his face streaked with soot and grime. He was young, probably not even 30, and his eyes held the weary look of a man who had seen too much in too little time. "Ma'am, this is a mandatory evacuation zone," he yelled over the wind. "I need you to clear this building, now." Maya met him at the door, planting her feet as if to physically bar his entry. "And take them where, deputy? To the highway that's currently a parking lot of fire? I have 34 people in here now, including 3 on portable oxygen and a woman who's having contractions. You want to be the one to turn off their oxygen? You want to deliver a baby in the back of your SUV? Oh. Miller was visibly conflicted. He peered over her shoulder, seeing the makeshift beds, the huddle of humanity within. He knew she was right. His job, his orders, his entire chain of command demanded he clear the building. His conscience screamed otherwise. He got on his radio, and Maya could hear a tinny, furious voice squawking on the other end of dispatcher, or maybe a superior officer, safe in a command center somewhere. Look, you are creating a huge problem for us, Miller said, lowering his radio, his voice a mix of frustration and pleading. This is an unauthorized shelter. You are not sanctioned. I'm a nurse, Maya replied, her voice dangerously quiet. In the middle of a disaster, with patients who will die without care. That is all the sanction I need. Now, are you going to help me, or are you going to arrest me for doing the job your bosses in their air-conditioned offices failed to do? He stared at her, then at the church, then back up at the angry sky. He was just one man, a small cog in a massive, failing machine. He made a decision. Stay off the radio, he muttered, his voice low. Don't draw any more attention to yourselves. I was never here. He got back in his SUV and drove off into the smoke, leaving Maya standing in the doorway, her heart pounding. She had won, for now. But she had also officially defied a direct order from law enforcement. She had crossed a line. The next 66 hours blurred into a single, continuous loop of exhaustion and duty. The power grid failed completely, plunging the church into a profound darkness broken only by flashlights, cell phone screens, and the terrifying, pulsing glow of the fire outside. Time ceased to have meaning. It was measured in IV bags changed, fevers checked, and panicked souls comforted. Supplies dwindled at an alarming rate. Maya became a master of improvisation. She used vodka from the church's sacramental storage to sterilize instruments. She rationed the last of the morphine for a man with a crushed leg, making an impossible choice. She comforted a woman who, listening to a crackling battery-powered radio, heard her own street address read from a list of destroyed homes. Maya just held her as she wept. She deputized a terrified but capable 17-year-old named Alex, who had been separated from his family. He became her right hand, running messages, organizing supplies, and, in a moment of genius, finding a single bar of cell service by the bell tower. He began sending out messages, letting frantic families know their loved ones were alive. The emotional toll was immense. In the darkest hours of the third night, an elderly man named Frank Miller, who had a chronic heart condition, passed away. His breathing simply slowed and then stopped. Maya held his hand, knowing that even in a fully equipped ICU, his chances would have been slim. But it still felt like a failure. She found a quiet corner behind the altar, slid down the wall, and for the first time, felt the tears come. She was so tired, her bones ached with a fatigue so deep it felt like it was in her marrow. Just as a sob escaped her, a small hand touched her shoulder. It was one of the Jackson kids, a little girl of about 6, named Lily. She held out a slightly crushed granola bar. "You should eat," the little girl whispered. "You're taking care of everyone." Maya looked at the small offering, at the child's trusting face, and the dam of her exhaustion held. She wiped her eyes, took the granola bar, and forced a smile. "Thank you, sweetie, you're right." She got back up. She went back to work. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, a miracle. The wind shifted. The sky, which had been a malevolent orange, softened to a dirty gray. A light drizzle began to fall. The fire's roar lessened to a distant rumble. It was over. The immediate danger had passed. A wave of profound, bone-deep relief washed over the shelter. People cried, they hugged, they prayed. Maya walked outside, into the cool, damp air. The landscape was a blackened, skeletal ruin, but it was no longer burning. She stood there, inhaling the clean, wet air, and finally allowed herself to feel the crushing weight of the last 96 hours. It took another 10 hours to wind everything down. With the roads slowly reopening, a stream of relieved family members began to arrive, each reunion a tearful, joyous scene. Maya, Ben, and the others coordinated the handoffs, ensuring every single person they'd sheltered was accounted for and safely on their way. Finally, just before dusk, Maya drove the stolen hospital van, now nearly empty, back to her own quiet street. Her house was still standing, miraculously untouched, save for a thick blanket of ash that gave the world a monochromatic, mournful look. She stumbled through her front door and dropped her keys on the counter. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the constant noise of the past 4 days. She turned on her phone, which she'd kept off to preserve the battery. It exploded. Dozens of texts, hundreds of social media notifications. Alex, the teenager she deputized, had apparently been posting updates and photos throughout the ordeal. His story of the rogue nurse who'd saved them all had been picked up by a local blogger, then a regional news outlet. The headlines were surreal. The Angel of Pine Ridge, nurse defutes orders, saves dozens, and rogue nurse's makeshift shelter saves, lives as official response falters. For a fleeting moment, she felt a flicker of pride. Then, the exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. She didn't want to be a hero. She just wanted to sleep for a week. Her phone rang, a shrill, unwelcome intrusion. The caller ID read, Mark Peterson. She hesitated, then answered. Maya, she said, her voice raspy. Rivera. Peterson's voice was as cold and sharp as breaking glass. There was no greeting. No, are you okay? I've seen the news. And I've also seen the preliminary inventory report from the supply closets you raided. You are to report to my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I suggest you bring a lawyer. Maya blinked, the words not quite computing. A lawyer? Mark? I saved 34 lives. You exposed this hospital to millions of dollars in potential lawsuits, he hissed. You stole a vehicle. You stole thousands of dollars in narcotics and supplies. You operated an unlicensed, unhygienic facility that could have killed someone. You are suspended, without pay, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into grand theft of hospital property, endangerment of patients, and gross criminal insubordination. Don't talk to anyone. Get a lawyer. The line went dead. Maya stood in her silent kitchen, the phone still pressed to her ear. It felt like she'd been punched in the gut. The world tilted on its axis. He hadn't praised her. He hadn't thanked her. He had threatened her. The rage, cold and clean, began to burn away the fog of her exhaustion. The next morning, the assault continued, but on a different front. As a local news van idled hopefully down the street, her next-door neighbor, Dale Calloway, marched across the lawn. Dale was a retired man whose only joy in life seemed to be finding fault in others. He was the self-appointed guardian of the HOA covenants, a petty tyrant of lawn maintenance and garbage can placement. Maya, he said, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed. I saw you on the TV. Very dramatic. But I need you to get all this stuff out of your garage. He pointed a trembling finger at a few leftover boxes containing saline bags and sterile bandages she'd brought back from the church, planning to return them. That's a clear violation of HOA Code 7B, subsection 4. No storage of commercial or medical materials. And that van you had parked here last night was a commercial vehicle. That's another write-up right there. Maya just stared at him. The sheer, monumental pettiness of the man was breathtaking. A wildfire had just nearly wiped their town off the map. She had personally saved dozens of their neighbors, and his primary concern was a box of bandages in her garage. You, sir, she thought with venomous clarity, are a human splinter. Before she could form a reply that wouldn't get her arrested for assault, a pristine black SUV with the county seal pulled up to the curb. Director Sheila Evans got out, dressed in a sharp blazer, her hair perfectly coiffed. She approached Maya with a smile that was all teeth. Miss Rivera, Sheila Evans, County OEM, she said, as if Maya wouldn't recognize the woman who'd been on TV every hour. Quite the stunt you pulled. I was saving lives, Maya said, her voice flat. You were grandstanding, Evans corrected, her smile never wavering. We had official shelters, transportation corridors, and protocols in place. When individuals like you go rogue, it undermines the entire system. It causes panic and sows confusion. You actively defied a county evacuation order, Ms. Rivera. You put first responders, like Deputy Miller, in an impossible position. Your system left 34 people to die in a parking lot. Maya shot back. Evans' eyes flashed with anger. My system has to account for the safety of 200,000 residents in this county, not just one photogenic group you decided to adopt. You didn't save people. You created a liability. You made us look incompetent, and I do not appreciate that. You've created a bureaucratic nightmare for us. We will be in touch. She turned on her heel, got back in her car, and sped off. The rage bait was laid. Evans wasn't angry because Maya had failed. She was furious because Maya had succeeded, highlighting the catastrophic failure of Evans' own organization. It was pure, unadulterated ego. Dale Calloway, feeling vindicated and empowered by the official dressing down he'd just witnessed, puffed out his chest and pulled out his phone. "That's it," he declared. "I'm reporting this to the county and the health department. Who knows what diseases are in those boxes? This is a potential biohazard." Over the next 12 hours, the system began to squeeze. A code enforcement officer, a weary-looking woman who clearly didn't want to be there, arrived to issue Maya a formal citation for improper storage of medical waste, thanks to Dale's call. A courier delivered a thick, terrifying envelope from the hospital's law firm, full of legalese about audits and potential criminal charges. And then, Deputy Miller returned. He wasn't the conflicted, sympathetic man from the church. He was stiff, official, his face unreadable. "Ma'am, I have to take your formal statement," he said, avoiding her eyes. "My superiors have ordered me to open a criminal file, and we have a report that you are in unauthorized possession of controlled substances belonging to Pine Ridge Regional Hospital." Maya's laugh was brittle and harsh. "You mean the morphine I used to treat a man's third-degree burns while your bosses were updating their Twitter feed? That morphine?" "I just have to follow my orders, ma'am," he recited, the words hollow. "We have a warrant to search the premises for the remainder of the hospital's property." She watched, numb, as he and another deputy walked into her garage and retrieved the last 2 boxes of supplies. They were just doing their job. Everyone was just doing their job. And their collective jobs were creating a faceless, soul-crushing wall of institutional power designed to crush her for the crime of being a decent human being. She sank onto her couch, the fight draining out of her. She was alone. They were going to bury her, and that's when she first heard the thunder. We are back on the porch. The cold coffee mug is still in Maya's hand. But now, we understand. We have seen the heroism and felt the sting of the ingratitude. The arrival of the 12 helicopters is no longer a mystery. It is the jaw-dropping, infuriating climax of a bureaucratic revenge fantasy. The noise is a physical presence, a concussive force that rattles the windows in their frames and the air in her lungs. The downdraft is a hurricane of ash and grit. It's a ridiculous, disproportionate show of force, a multi-agency sledgehammer brought down on a single nail. Director Sheila Evans, Administrator Mark Peterson, and Deputy Miller form a grim trinity at the bottom of her porch steps. They are flanked by a dozen other officials, men and women in suits, in uniforms, in hazmat gear from the health department, their faces grim and self-important. Evans steps forward, holding a clipboard like a scepter. She speaks in a loud, clear voice, designed to carry, designed to intimidate. "Maya Rivera, by the authority of the County of Pine Ridge and the State of California, we are here to execute a multi-agency warrant. You are found to be operating an unlicensed medical facility, are in illegal possession of stolen hospital property and controlled substances, and are in direct violation of multiple public health and safety codes, as well as the standing emergency orders issued by this office." Peterson, his face a mottled red, points a shaking finger at her. "We are here to recover all hospital property, Maya. Every last bandage, every vial, every roll of gauze you stole from us. This is it, the peak of the rage bait, the absolute theater of the absurd. The audience's blood boils. They are witnessing a full-scale tactical operation being launched against a single, exhausted nurse on her own lawn. As if on cue, 2 officials in white Tyvek suits begin to march toward her garage to secure the scene. Their movements slow and deliberate, as if she were harboring a supervirus and not just an overdeveloped sense of duty. And in that moment, something inside Maya Rivera snaps. The bone-deep exhaustion doesn't vanish, but it transmutes. It becomes fuel. It sharpens into a pure, incandescent, righteous fury. She sets her coffee mug down on the porch railing with a deliberate, sharp click. She straightens her back. Her voice, when she speaks, is quiet at first, but it cuts through the rotor wash and the tension like a scalpel. "Are you kidding me?" Heads turn. The officials pause. "Are you actually kidding me?" she says again, a little louder. She walks to the edge of her porch, looking down at them. 12 helicopters. She says the words slowly, letting their absurdity hang in the air. 12. A harsh, barking laugh escapes her lips. "You know what I could have done with one of these 90 hours ago? One helicopter? I could have airlifted the Gibson family off the roof of their collapsing house. I could have gotten emergency oxygen to Frank Miller before his lungs gave out and he died in my arms. But you were all hiding in a bunker 50 miles away, looking at maps and talking about protocols and jurisdictions. She takes a step down, then another, until she is standing on the lawn, eye to eye with them. She points a finger at Peterson. You were worried about your budget. You were worried about a lawsuit from some insurance company. You called the people I was trying to save liabilities. Her finger swivels to Evans. And you were worried about your press conference. You were worried I was making you look bad. Your ego was more important than their lives. Her gaze falls on Deputy Miller, and her expression softens for a fraction of a second. And you were worried about your orders. I get it. It's easier that way. She turns to the whole assembly, her voice rising to a roar that seems to come from the core of the earth. While I was holding the hand of a dying man, while I was cleaning the burns of a firefighter, while I was telling a terrified little girl that everything was going to be okay, you were all just covering your asses. The names you call liabilities and unauthorized civilians are Sarah and John and Eleanor and Carlos. They are the people you left behind to burn. So you go ahead, take your damn bandages, search my garage, confiscate my non-existent biohazards, but you will not take my dignity. You don't have the authority. A tense silence falls. Evan's face is white with rage. Peterson looks ready to explode. Deputy Miller takes a hesitant step forward, his hand once again drifting toward his sidearm, his duty reasserting itself. Ma'am, you need to calm down. But just as he's about to reach for her, a new voice cuts through the air. Keep rolling. Make sure you get the zoom on their faces. Everyone turns. Standing on the sidewalk, half hidden behind a hedge, is Alex, the 17-year-old from the church. He had come to bring Maya a thank you card from the group, and in his hands, he's holding his smartphone, pointed directly at the scene. He has been live streaming the entire confrontation for the last 10 minutes. On the screen of his phone, which he holds up defiantly, a small red box in the corner reads Live. Below it, a viewer count is ticking up like a slot machine hitting a jackpot. 10, 0, 50, 0, 200, 0, 500, 0. And the comment feed is a waterfall of pure, unadulterated public rage, scrolling too fast to read, but one hashtag appears over and over again. Helicopters for a hero. The color drains from Sheila Evans' face. Mark Peterson stares at the phone as if it's a venomous snake. They had staged this elaborate, intimidating piece of theater to crush one woman in private. Instead, she had turned their stage into a global courtroom, and Alex had just made them the star defendants. The power dynamic on that small, ash-covered lawn didn't just shift, it shattered. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Within the hour, the footage from Alex's livestream was the lead story on every news network. The narrative was irresistible, the lone, heroic nurse against the soulless, jackbooted forces of bureaucracy. The rage Maya's supporters felt was now the rage of a nation. The Pine Ridge Regional Hospital's phone lines were so completely jammed with angry calls that the system crashed. Wealthy donors publicly announced they were pulling their funding. Nurses from 3 different departments staged a spontaneous walkout in solidarity, standing on the sidewalk with signs that read, I am Maya Rivera. The governor's office, sensing a political catastrophe of the highest order, held an emergency press conference. Before the day was out, Director Sheila Evans was placed on indefinite administrative leave. A GoFundMe page, started by Alex with the title Maya Rivera's Legal Defense, Recovery Fund, blew past its 10-0 goal in 7 minutes. By midnight, it had surpassed $1 million. Dale Calloway's house was surrounded by so many news vans that he couldn't get his car out of the driveway. A day later, his HOA was hit with a class action lawsuit from dozens of other residents for a pattern of targeted harassment. The retreat from Maya's lawn was as swift as it was humiliating. The officials practically tripped over each other to get back to their helicopters. The criminal investigation was dropped by the district attorney's office before dinner, citing a profound lack of prosecutorial merit. The board of directors of the hospital held an emergency meeting and, in a unanimous vote, terminated Mark Peterson's employment, effective immediately. They then issued a gushing public apology and offered Maya her job back, along with a promotion and a substantial raise. She respectfully declined. 6 months later, Pine Ridge was healing. The hillsides were still black, but hints of green were beginning to poke through the charred soil. In the center of town, in a newly constructed community hall funded by a certain anonymous GoFundMe donation, Maya Rivera stood at a podium. She looked rested. She looked strong. She looked like a woman who had found her purpose. She had used the money and her newfound platform to start the Pine Ridge Disaster Response Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to training and equipping ordinary citizens with the skills and supplies to create a network of community-led micro-shelters for the next time disaster struck. It was a program designed to fill the gap between a crisis hitting and the official response lumbering into action. Her first graduating class sat before her. In the front row was Alex, now her lead intern. A few seats down, in civilian clothes, sat a sheepish but smiling ex-Deputy Miller, who had resigned from the force and was now her head of logistics. She looked out at the faces of her neighbors, her friends, the people she had fought for. "The helicopters on my lawn weren't an ending," her final steady voiceover concluded, a voice of hard-won wisdom. "They were a beginning. They thought they could punish me with the weight of the system, but they forgot something. A system is just a collection of people. And when enough people decide to do the right thing, there's no force on earth that can stop them. My name is Maya Rivera. I'm a nurse, and my work is just getting started.